Quads are the cornerstone of well-developed and sculpted legs. If you're lacking in this area, it will significantly impact your overall appearance and physique. In today's video, we're going to go over the 5 best quad exercises that you need to start performing if you want to accelerate your quad growth. Now, before we jump into today's video, let's quickly go over how our quads are actually made up so we better understand why these exercises are effective. As the name suggests, the quads are made up of 4 muscles. There is the vastus lateralis on the outer thigh and the vastus medialis on the inner thigh. You then have the vastus intermedius, which lies deep to the rectus femoris. Your quads as a whole perform knee extension, but the rectus femoris also assists with hip flexion. And the goal is to have equal and well-developed growth in all 4 of these muscles to give an aesthetic and sculpted look to our legs. Now that we understand how our quads are made up, let's jump into exercise number 5, which is going to be lunges, biasing our quads. Lunges are a fundamental exercise and will work almost every muscle in your leg. It will help strengthen your core, improve your balance, and when you perform the variation that we're going to talk about, it will light up your quads. Plus, lunges require almost no equipment and they're super easy to perform. Now, there are 2 variations of lunges that we can perform. The first one is to bias the quads, and the second is to bias the glutes. And this is all going to come down to the torso position. When you keep your torso more upright, this will place more attention on the quads, whereas when you have your torso more forward, it will shift the tension to the glutes. Now, whether you choose stationary or moving lunges is completely up to you. Now, for me personally, when I'm performing lunges with the goal of building muscle, I tend to go with the stationary alternative. And performing the stationary lunges is going to keep the quads on the intended side constantly firing, which ultimately will lead to more growth. And that wraps up exercise number 5. Now let's jump to exercise number 4, which is going to be the knee extension machine. This exercise is a staple in the majority of people's leg day programs, as it's one of the only exercises where you can really isolate the quads. When properly integrated into a training routine, you can really work your quads and stimulate muscle growth. And while this exercise is extremely easy to perform, there are some variations that we can integrate to change which part of the quad that we're actually biasing. And I also really enjoy integrating single leg knee extensions into my training routine, as it allows me to improve my mind muscle connection and also fix any muscular imbalances that I may have. But integrating heavy double leg knee extensions is also very beneficial and another common variation I perform. And now where the exercise gets fun, which I briefly mentioned earlier, is changing our foot position. When you turn your toes in or out, it changes your hip position, which will ultimately change which part of the quads you're primarily working. A good rule of thumb is that if your toes are pointed inwards, you'll primarily work the outer quads. Then alternatively, if your toes are pointed out, you'll primarily be working the inner quads. Now this isn't 100% necessary, as all 4 of your quads are going to be working as a unit, but in some instances where you may have a muscular imbalance, this can be beneficial. And that wraps up exercise number 4. Now let's jump to exercise number 3, which is going to be heel elevated goblet squats. Goblet squats are a favorite of mine when it comes to training legs, and I believe it's also one of the best exercises for quad development with this variation. Elevating your heels on a plate allows your knees to track further forward, placing more emphasis on the quads rather than the glutes. And this is also a great variation to perform if you're a beginner and you've been noticing that you struggle keeping the weight in your heels. Now, how do we properly perform this exercise? The easiest way you can elevate your heels is to use a 10-pound weight under both feet. However, if your gym has a slant board, this would be ideal as it decreases the likelihood it would fall out from under your feet. Then you want to hold the weight with both hands right up against your chest. If you have space between the weight and your chest, this is going to put a lot more stress on the low back, which ultimately we don't want. Then, keeping a neutral spine, squeeze your core and initiate the squat. Try and go as low as you can safely and aim for at least 90 degrees so we can take our quads through the maximum range of motion that's available. And that wraps up exercise number 3. Now let's jump to the number 2 spot on this list, which is going to be split squats, biasing our quads. Split squats could be interchangeable with number 1 depending on who you ask, but they're an amazing exercise to unilaterally train the quads. This allows you to prevent muscular imbalances, and it's also a great balance exercise, as you need a lot of stability throughout the entire movement. And you will be working the entire lower extremity, hitting the glutes, quads, and even the calves slightly. However, just like the lunges, many people don't realize that there's 2 variations that we can perform, one to bias the glutes more and one to bias the quads more. And once again, it all stems to the torso position. Keeping our torso in a more upright position will focus more on the quads, whereas if you lean your torso forward while maintaining a neutral spine, you will shift the focus to the glutes. You're still going to work the entire lower extremity no matter which variation you choose, but if your goal is to primarily grow the quads, then I highly recommend you go with the first variation. Now, in terms of how we properly perform the exercise, the first thing we want to do is have proper foot position. And a way you can ensure this every time is to take a seat on the bench and fully extend your leg. This will place your foot exactly where it needs to be every single time, and it will prevent you from doing the beginner technique of hopping to get your foot into position. Then you're going to lower yourself and try and bend that front leg to 90 degrees if possible, then return to your starting position. And that wraps up exercise number 2. Now for the moment you've been waiting for, coming in at number 1 on this list, it's going to be barbell back squats. I'm sure that this is of no surprise to anyone that back squats got the number 1 spot on this list. Not only is it great at working your quads, but there are numerous other benefits, such as strengthening the core, improving your overall range of motion, and it's arguably the best compound exercise for burning calories. It was also found in 2022 that a parallel barbell back squat induces equal amount of growth in all 4 quad muscles, which can lead to an equally developed and sculpted looking leg. Now I would say that squats are one of the harder exercises to actually learn at the gym, but we're going to go over proper technique to help you get your form down to make sure you get the most out of this exercise. And if you're a beginner and you've been trying to get your form down but you've just been struggling, it took me almost 2 weeks to do a proper squat, which is way longer than most people, so don't be too hard on yourself. But the first thing you want to do before you even unrack the bar is squeeze your shoulder blades together. This will activate your scapular muscles in your traps, and this is ultimately where we want to place the bar. We don't want to place the bar on our spine because it's not only uncomfortable, but it's not very sustainable either as we increase the weight in the future. Then once you unrack the bar, you want to maintain a neutral spine and be sure to engage your core as you push your hips down and back. This will ensure a proper bar path and help prevent your knees from going excessively forward. Try to get parallel and then return to the starting position. And this is obviously a very oversimplified explanation on how to do a proper squat, but I plan on making an in-depth video in the future on proper form for back squats, so stay tuned for that. And let me know in the comments what you think of this list and if you would make any changes and why. But if you integrate all 5 of these exercises into your training routine, you're going to see significant improvements in your overall quad size and your leg growth. And if you're looking for a fully optimized leg day routine backed by science, check out this video next because it's going to go over exactly that.